Welcome back, Mother Funny Tribe. It's Angie and Andy, and I'm breathing just fine today. So,
yay!
Here we are. Yay! So, all is well in the world, and we are going to have a great discussion today about a very important, so important mom topic. We haven't said how important our topics have been in a while. I just realized.
And this is one that everyone can relate to and understand. And it's one of those situations where you can either be stressed out or laugh at it or just move on with your day. So you definitely want to listen or watch on YouTube this great episode we're about to have.
Yes. So what are we talking about today, Angie?
Today we're talking about temper tantrums.
Temper tantrums.
We are going to focus on temper tantrums for toddlers because let's face it, a child can throw a temper tantrum at any age. Sometimes yes. I will even say like a 3-year-old kind of acts like a 13-year-old. But we're not going to focus on those teenagers. We talked all about them last week. And so today we're going to focus on temper tantrums. But we're not going to sit here and complain or just talk all about the negative part of temper tantrums because I think in a way a lot of toddlers are misunderstood. A child is not throwing a temper tantrum on purpose. They're not doing it to anger the parent. They're definitely not trying to manipulate a parent. Like a 1-year-old doesn't know how to manipulate. A 1-year-old does not know how to control the situation. Usually, and by usually, I mean almost 100% of the time, a temper tantrum is because a toddler is trying to communicate to their parents or to the people around them. And it's their way of expressing how they feel because as you guys know, developmentally, a lot of them don't have the words or the vocabulary to actually say what they're feeling or what their emotions are. And shocker to everybody, temper tantrums are actually appropriate. And developmentally, this is at that age. If your child is having a temper tantrum between 1 and 3 years old, that's a developmentally appropriate behavior. And I kind of think some people judge temper tantrums a little too harshly. I'm just going to say it. Andy has influenced me, and I'm just going to say, I'm going to state my opinion in that situation.
Wow.
I actually have a lot of opinions about temper tantrums because I really kind of... I feel really bad for toddlers. Not because of a temper tantrum, but because of how society kind of perceives it. And I think a temper tantrum has been judged too harshly.
I can tell you feel very passionate about this subject because instead of coming off like usually we start and you're like everyone does things differently. You're like, look, temper tantrums are good for toddlers. We're not going to say anything negative. Like you're like, this is what we're going to do.
We are because so many people will think, oh, temper tantrum, I already know all about that. But do you? Or is it just something that you think you know a lot about?
Apparently we don't. Tell us. Apparently we need to be informed. I am in the toddler phase with my grandson. So we're in the middle of temper tantrums. So why do you think you need to be, or what do you want people to know? Like, what is it that really frustrates you when it comes to how people perceive temper tantrums?
Well, toddlers, like they're still in that like early stage of like social, emotional, and language development. So they don't know all the words. So then how are they supposed to express exactly what they want? People will say, oh, a lot of temper tantrums happen because the child is frustrated. Well, there's so many reasons why a temper tantrum can occur. Maybe they're tired. Maybe they're hungry. Maybe they just need a snack. Maybe they're sick. A lot of kids will have temper tantrums just because they're overly exhausted and their body is too tired, or they don't fully know how to express their emotions. And so I think part of it is fully trying to understand what the child needs at the basic level first and try to meet that need before it's like, oh, let's handle the behavior. Or how sometimes people might believe that like a temper tantrum is a behavior that needs to be fixed or corrected. It's actually just your child's way of communicating with the parent or with the mom. it's not an idea of, now this is again for toddlers. Like when you're talking about older children, that could be a whole different conversation. And so that's not, like I said, that's not what we're discussing about now. But a lot of times a toddler might just be overwhelmed by the strong emotions. And because they don't have the language to communicate that, then they might cry or fall on the ground or kick or whatever it is that they're doing. It's the overwhelming feeling that they just don't know what to do with it. And I think it would be great is if a lot of moms would kind of research more about the reasons behind a temper tantrum and what their child is trying to communicate instead of just saying this is a behavior that needs to be corrected. Personally, I don't think a toddler's temper tantrums need to be corrected. I think you help the child learn.
Oh, look it. We've got
an opinion today.
We're going to tell you a little bit, or Angie's going to tell you just a little bit. She's going to give you a sneak peek into her opinion.
I mean, you're in the toddler phase with your grandson, right? You know?
Right.
What do you see? Okay, here's the question. You have older children. Obviously, your daughter has a child. You've seen the pendulum swing of like temper tantrum needs to be corrected to now this idea of like help them, comfort them, work with them on breathing, which is huge. That's what I've done for years with my toddlers when they were going through that toddler phase. But now you've seen kind of a different approach to temper tantrum.
Yeah. So the difference. So yeah, when my kids were little, the wisdom of the day was basically you teach them as young as possible not to have a temper tantrum. And by doing that, they will kind of grow out of it quickly. They learn more about just not being selfish. Because I think the core of what they were saying is, you know, babies are selfish, kids are selfish, and they have to learn not to be selfish. And it kind of stems from that.
I'm sorry, that's just wrong on many levels.
I know. Well, okay, I'm not. A baby knows what they want, and even if they're not allowed to have it, they're like, I want it. It's about me. It's about me being comfortable and happy. But that's okay. That's not wrong because there's like no other way for them to be. You know, they don't come out of the womb. Maybe Jesus did. I don't know. They don't come out of the womb like, Mom, how are you today? Let's talk about how you're feeling. You know, it's all humans. We come out of the womb. It's survival.
I would say that's more survival instinct to keep them alive.
But there is a point where they have to learn, okay, we have to share. And they might have tantrums during that. Because kids, I mean, my 2.5-year-old grandson throws tantrums when he doesn't get what he wants. And it's no longer survival. It's just, this is what I want. My daughter does a fantastic job handling it. And she does like the breathing. But what I think the difference is that the tantrum, he's not shamed for having the tantrum, which I think is the difference. When our kids were little, it was shameful to have a tantrum. Now it's still not a behavior you want to see a child keep. They do need to grow out of it or like learn how to emotionally regulate or handle these big emotions. But she doesn't let it continue. She doesn't allow him to like, okay, so here's the thing. This is what we deal with when I'm around. He wants grandma to be with him in everything when I'm there. So, for example, we were leaving church the other day. I put him in the car and he's like, Grandma car. And I'm like, no, honey, we're going to meet you. I got to drive my own car. And he just melts down, starts pulling at me. And of course, my grandma heart's breaking, like tears, crying.
You're the one with tears, crying, and pulling.
Yeah, pretty much. I was like, and I'm just looking at him like, he just wants his grandma. That's his basic need. He just wants grandma. But Daisy is like, Mom, walk away. It's okay. And then she'll go to him and be like, no, like, I'm not no, but she'll be like, we're having big feelings. We know you love grandma. We know, whatever. Like, but she doesn't, because like I will continue to let the tantrum happen, or I will reinforce it so that it would happen again. Because once they get to a certain age, they know, they're smart. They're like, if I cry when I don't get it and I get what I want, well, no, I've learned I just have to cry to get what I want. And I think that's natural when they're little, but eventually there's got to be a growing and a maturing out of that. So whatever step that looks like, again, what I would reinforce is that as a toddler, I think parenting now is saying, okay, we understand that that's normal, that it's, expected. And if you just try to stop the tantrum because it's embarrassing or it's shameful, you're actually going to emotionally stunt your child, because then they don't learn how to regulate those emotions, and it'll just manifest into something later. Where I think my early parenting, it was you stop those emotions so it doesn't happen later, but that's not what happens. You stop it and people don't know how to handle their emotions later, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And that's one thing, like I mentioned before, Brooklyn could never cry too hard, because then she would start to take super shallow breaths. So that's really if she started to get upset or throw a temper tantrum, the first thing we had to do was just work with her on her breathing and just blow out, blow, and we would take a deep breath, and then we would actually model that behavior, take a deep breath, and then I would blow out, and then she would take a deep breath. And what's interesting is that if I'm taking deep breaths, whoever's looking at me, it will start to calm them down also. And obviously that's the same thing for a child. So Brooklyn learned at a very young age to take really deep breaths when she became overwhelmed. Because one thing I've noticed is once kids are at that moment of their breathing is under control, their crying is under control, and really the breathing method, I think personally, that slows down or really minimizes the length of a temper tantrum. Because instead of the child being so upset about what they don't have, or Ezra being I want to be a grandma, it's right now what it's doing is Ezra's now focusing on his breathing, or what Brooklyn's doing is focusing on her breathing. So it shifts back to what's the most important thing right now? It's breathing. And then once their breathing is under control, then it's that talking with them, giving them the words, or helping them explain why they're so upset. And one thing is, I know a lot of parents will try to talk their child through it, which is great. But also, as many people know, toddlers can't hear too many words, because then that can be overwhelming or frustrating too. They're not a teenager. They don't need to hear a 5-minute lecture.
You can't just reason with them. You can't, and they don't understand a lot of concepts. When you're trying to reason with them, you're see all these other people. What do you think they're thinking? They're I don't know. It's about me right now, and I really want that cookie. You know what I mean? They don't understand that. So I've seen in my own life, my own kids trying to talk to toddlers or talk them out of a tantrum does not work very well. It just prolongs the agony on both sides. But I think the goal is the same. You do want to eventually stop the tantrum. It's just how you come at it. Do you come at it with the whole goal is not just to stop the tantrum, or the whole goal is to help this child regulate in a way that will help them become an adult? Because really the core of what I always felt as a parent dealing with tantrums is, what is this going to look like in the future for my child? And I think of adults who have tantrums.
Which is not age appropriate.
No.
If you're having a temper tantrum and you're an adult, that's something else to talk about. If you see an adult having a temper tantrum, do you walk over to them, taking deep breaths, and then do you start saying, I know you're having big feelings. I know you're overwhelmed.
Yes. We're not happy, are we? It's okay. We're having big feelings. Let's count. Let's breathe in. Watch me. We're going to breathe. Yeah. Sometimes that's an inside thought. Yeah. That thought you're having, that's for the inside. That's not for the outside. I know you wanted that parking space, but you know what, friend? There's a lot of people who want parking spaces, and a lot of people just, sometimes things aren't fair. So
maybe road rage is just drivers having a temper tantrum. That's all it is. That's all it is.
Totally. It's grown-up temper tantrums. I think I'm, again, not a professional, but I think it stems from not knowing what to do with your big feelings, which is what we're talking about, right? Like temper tantrums, like you were saying, at the core are big feelings for whatever reason and not knowing what to do with it. So I guess the old way of just like nipping it in the bud and being like, this is bad. You're doing bad things right now. You're in trouble. You should be punished, which was, for many, 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 many years. That led to kids probably behaving more in public, but it probably also translated to people maybe being passive aggressive, I've heard narcissistic personality disorders or narcissistic personalities can come from that.
People pleasers.
People pleasers. Yes. Big one. People pleasing, anxiety, the silent treatment. The silent treatment is a grown-up form of tantrums.
Whoa.
It's people who are throwing a tantrum and they're using, and it's a manipulation. Like as they get older. So that's the thing too, is these toddlers, they might not be manipulating now because they know what they want and they're all that they can understand is this is what I want. Why shouldn't I have it? But once they get older, then they know like if a cause and effect happens in the same cause or effect, or if the parent is inconsistent. But anyway, it turns into manipulation.
Well, and at the idea, if a child is frustrated and they're age 1, 2, 3, I would even add 4. They're like ages 1 through 4, like working through that frustration. And I think that's more of the parenting style now, where back in the day, it was like, no, just stop that. Stop that frustration. Don't be frustrated. Don't be overwhelmed. Don't behave that way.
Yes.
Right.
Don't
just
have
stuff
emotions.
it all inside.
Don't have feelings. Yeah. It's good for you. Ulcers are amazing.
And so now the idea is to work through that frustration. Frustration and feeling overwhelmed, that is a human emotion. Everybody, regardless of the age, is going to feel that. So what are you going to do? What is your response when you feel overwhelmed or when you feel frustrated? Or sometimes a child will have a temper tantrum because they're disappointed. Or like I said, they're just overly exhausted. That's a huge thing. Even my twins who are in 2nd grade, like how do you behave when you're completely exhausted? Well, this is time just to go to bed and maybe you're going to bed a little early. And then as adults, when we're fully exhausted and we're, then we get overwhelmed and then maybe it affects our behavior, so what do you do when you have that feeling? Do you just shut it all down and like stop it? I mean, this one part of the research, oh my gosh, I was looking through this stuff. Dude, I was like, this is awful advice. Like some of it was a little frustrating and maybe that's a little why I'm triggered. Cause like there's the worst.
Tell us the bad advice.
Parenting advice out there, and I was like, can I just go and like just delete this? Like this is horrible.
It exists in this world. What is it? What's the worst?
The worst to me was if your child starts to have a temper tantrum, just turn your back to them. The theory behind that was to ignore that behavior. But to literally and physically turn your back to a child, and sometimes temper tantrums can last for 10 minutes. So your back is to them. Well, now you don't know if they're safe. You don't know if they're okay. Maybe you don't even know where they've gone when you hear their like voice drifting away. But I'm like, how is that helping them regulate their emotions and deal with their big feelings if you're like, I'm turning my back to you. I will not help you through this. Could you imagine? Like, okay, we're moms. What if we're hanging out with a friend and we start to get overwhelmed with whatever the situation is and our friend just literally gets up and turns their back to us? Until we're like done. Could you imagine doing that? Like when you look at it from the grown-up perspective, is like, what if a trusted friend did this to me? Or what if like I was struggling with something and my friend was just like, nope, shut it down. And just was like, we're not going to talk through it. Right? Like you have to kind of, like you're saying, look at it from this perspective of how does this translate when they're older, or if I'm feeling this certain way, what would I want someone to do to comfort me? Obviously, I'm at a different developmental stage than a toddler.
Yes.
And I have more words and more vocabulary to communicate what I'm feeling and what I'm going through. But some of that is at the basic level. Should anyone be shunned? Should a 1-year-old be shunned? Like, honestly, like, are we going to shun a 1-year-old?
Okay, I'm not.
A 1-year-old just learns how to walk.
Okay.
Like, a 1-year-old has a 12-month-old to have one word, maybe 3. By age 1, they're beginning to walk. And then to be like, little 1-year-old.
This is what I'll say. If you have a friend and she's screaming and yelling at you because she doesn't like what you gave her for dinner, you can shun her. If you served her peas and she's throwing them at you and screaming and
oh my gosh, I would laugh. I would totally laugh. And you would too, and you know it.
I mean,
come on. Do we even have friends that would do that?
I'm saying
we don't interact with people that are going to get so mad they're going to throw peas at us.
So that's how.
That's a toxic person.
I think that's how we have to. Yes. So we should shun toxic people.
There's the boundary.
They're not meaning to be toxic.
Because they're not.
But they do act like a toxic person. They act like it. Like, I was just talking to my daughter. And she was talking about her toddler, and she's like, she loves, you love them more than life itself. Like, you just, you can't even describe. Just moms know how much love they have for their toddler. But their toddler will come up to you, hit you in the face, and then give you big kisses and tell you they love you so much, and then scream at you and throw peas in your hair, all in like 5 minutes. So they have very toxic behavior. We've all felt as a baby or, as a toddler, whatever, we've all felt like disappointed, upset, angry for not getting what we want. So it's normal for a child to scream, throw a tantrum. In fact, when babies were babies, before they could talk, when they were newborns, the only way they could get milk or tell you if anything wrong was crying. That's the only way they could do it. So we don't punish babies for crying when they're have no idea what's going on. Well, then you get the toddler phase and they can start interacting more, and you're just trying to train them out of it. Whatever that looks like, help. Yes, you have this emotion. You will have this emotion your whole life. I still get upset when I don't get what I want sometimes. I'm still get frustrated. I still get angry. How do I deal with that in a healthy, reasonable way where I'm taking care of not only my mental health, but also being honoring and respectful to those around me?
I seriously just want to toss peas in your face right now.
Do it.
That is so funny.
I'll turn my back on you.
Oh no.
Well, I could see, with the whole turning back thing, I'll go off on my little soapbox for that. I think when they're a year old, it is, I mean, it seems a little dangerous to turn your back, but I could kind of see how if that specific child keeps bringing the drama into it, and maybe you're overwhelmed of just separating yourself from the drama of it all. That's the only way I mean, I don't know.
That's a huge point. Is the main and the most important thing when a child is having a temper tantrum is for the mom to remain calm. 100%, because you need to de-escalate that situation. You do not want to get frustrated. Yes. You don't want to get angry. You don't want to become overwhelmed. Moms have to remain calm. And I am a huge person who believes in energy, and if the mom is becoming more and more upset and more frustrated, then the child feels that energy, and then they're going to take on that energy, and then they're going to become more overwhelmed or more frustrated or mad or sad. It's going to actually feed into their emotions, which then can prolong that temper tantrum, because they say most temper tantrums only last 10 to 15 minutes. And I know we have to go soon, but just something from the experts is they're saying if your child is having multiple temper tantrums a day, and if they go longer than 15 minutes, you might want to seek professional help and go to the pediatrician and talk to them about that, because there could be another underlying cause.
Issue. Yeah. Good to know. Okay, so what are we going to talk about? We're just going to continue to talk about this, and we'll go back and forth with our opinions. opinions.
We will, because there's so many opinions out there, and obviously, like, Andie's bringing the old school approach. No, just kidding.
I'm just kidding.
I just had to mention it. It is good to hear
way.
about how people parented back in the day.
Back in my
what
day.
What did you talk about before? Was it like the pioneer days or whatever?
The pioneer. We made our butter. And we spanked the children and sent them to bed like the old lady who lived in the shoe. I mean, look at all the nursery rhymes.
Horrible.
Children should be seen and not heard. Okay, we're going to talk
about this.
We're going to talk about it later.
Just saying. My kids don't know any nursery rhymes. I am,
Are
because
you just saying?
you and I grew up on nursery rhymes, and kids don't learn them. Like all those weird ones, like the Three Blind Mice. My kids have no idea about the Three Blind Mice. The old lady, they don't know. Oh yeah,
really?
It's a thing. Like,
I had a nursery rhyme book that I think I read to Daisy, but I'd be like, every time, even as kids, we're like, this is messed up. And then they tell you the history of some of them, like Red Rosie. What was that one?
Oh, Ring Around the Rosies.
Ring Around the Rosie, about how that was all traumatic and about the plague or something. And
you want to talk about childhood trauma?
I know. Okay, we're next episode, we're going to talk childhood trauma.
Which, for the record, anyone who listened to the podcast where we mentioned Punky Brewster, Andie found the clip. Andie actually found the clip.
I did. It was like randomly popped up on my Instagram, and I'm like, no. See, people are talking about this.
Yeah, so she sent it to me to traumatize me.
I did. And I sent you the Smurf one today.
I watched it.
Did you see it? Were you crying?
There was so much truth in it. It was so funny. In how I grew up. Not that I believe it, but in how I grew up.
Yes, she does.
But that's for another day. Like us, share
another
us.
day.
If you don't share us, we're going to throw a temper tantrum. And Andie's going to throw peas in your hair.
Don't turn your back on us. We will tantrum.